with no bitterness or anger, only with plaintive reminder that it was there and it wanted him. My father, back home from work, the first scotch and cigar of the evening under his belt, sitting on my bed, reading to me, Winnie the Pooh, or as in tonight, Wind in the Willows. I shall never forget those stories, the intense thrill which ran through my body as I waited again for his voice, rich with affection, to perhaps end a chapter from The House at Pooh Corner with those reassuring words, "Silly old bear." But beyond the stories, I shall never forget the smell of my father. Scotch, cigar, cologne. I inhaled it, was lulled to sleep, felt safe, secure, home and stories. Unless we take with absolute seriousness the complete humanity of Jesus, theology runs into problems. So we have to contemplate what Jesus might have been feeling that evening in the house of his friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Perhaps the place where he felt most at home, the place where he could rest, be himself. Bethany's only a short journey from Jerusalem. The evening before his entry into the holy city. Tonight's gospel feels like an intimate dinner. Disciples, friends, a farewell dinner, perhaps. Even if those around him do not quite understand what's about to happen, perhaps they were filled with foreboding about what awaited them in Jerusalem the next day. And Jesus? It's funny, John's gospel, in spite of the way in which seems to exalt Jesus, the Word made flesh, actually contains also quite a lot about his emotions. He's angry and overcome with emotion at the grave of Lazarus. His soul is troubled when Greek proselytes ask to see him in Jerusalem a couple of days later. And in tonight's gospel, there's an implied sharpness in his rebuke to Judas for complaining about the outrageous waste. Over £2,000 in today's money, represented by the pouring of that precious nard. But there's no reference to how Jesus might have felt sitting there. We can surmise that on the eve of the short journey that will set in train the series of events that lead to certain death, in a place that was perhaps more like home to him than anywhere else, among friends so trusted, seemingly safe, he was nevertheless in a state of inner turmoil. Food, wine, talk, friendship, the sweetest things afforded to human beings, and yet looming over him, the knowledge of what the coming days will bring. And the perfume, does it soothe his troubled spirit? I wonder. Sensual, loving, certainly, but also troubling. As he points out, spikenard is kept for the anointing of dead bodies before they're wrapped in the shroud. Spikenard offered on the altar of incense in the temple accompanied the smoke of sacrifice rising from the slaughtered victim, the lamb offered to God. Whether or not Mary knows the symbolic significance of what she's doing, but how could she not? Her action and the powerful scent released provoke sharp reactions. It's an act of shocking intimacy in public. In other gospel accounts, it's not just Judas who's outraged at the waste, the expense, the embarrassing sensuality. All of the disciples protest. Something so provocative, powerful about the action and the fragrance How can you not react? But I'm struck by Jesus' stillness as he allows his body to be acted on. Athletes, before running their race, their bodies were anointed with oil. Victims on the altar of sacrifice. And about to be a dead body anointed for burial, take your pick. It's an action so filled with power that, of course, the intensity of the fragrance released which fills the house has to match it. It's a fragrance that attracts and repels at the same time. No wonder the early church came to see that fragrance as symbolic of the sweet fragrance of the gospel spreading throughout the world. A gospel that both attracted and provoked division. But I'm struck again by the way in which the fragrance that's released provokes an almost animal association, like Mole stopped on a dark road home by the smell of his old home. The smells of our childhood take us to a place, hopefully, of security. We lose those smells as we grow up, and other smells take their place, less pleasant. There are other smells in the nostrils of those gathered in that room, those who have had to compromise to come to an accommodation with Rome. The smell of disappointment in the nostrils of Judas, of embarrassment by those who observe. And for Lazarus, who's been to the gates of death and back, what will his nostrils be filled with? And you, the precious smell that you perhaps managed to sum up at the beginning. To recapture it is to be taken back, hopefully, to a place of safety and security, to be taken home. Perhaps that's Mary's gift to you and I tonight. To take us home to a place where we're loved. To take us home to a place where we are known and where we know in turn. To take us back to a place where the compromises of our adult life, the ways in which we have been hurt and have hurt others, the ways in which we've forgotten how to smell the sweet fragrance of God's love for us, can perhaps be recaptured. When I reached the age of 7, the bedtime stories stopped and I went to boarding school where the smells were very different. Boiled cabbage, bleach, dusty old schoolmasters. Returning home for exeats or at half-term, the smells were of home again. Roast lamb with garlic, scotch and cigars, my own room. Can it be that to return home to God's heart of love is to return home to that first delight, that smell of home, where we find a God who has always been waiting for us and waits for us still?